I live in North Wales, UK. For anyone who's had the pleasure of visiting, it truly is a beautiful place to live, though for an adolescent boy, it certainly lacks in things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated, in comparison to the closest cities that is, there's a dual carriageway running right along the coast from Wales to England. Also, train tracks run alongside this road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. Anyway, there was one night a few years ago, when about 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the group had observed a manhole cover nearby, which we believed to be the entrance. On closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be required to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily as the train track was right beside us, not close enough to be of any danger, but definitely a sufficiently small distance to cause panic for any train driver, and panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we had removed the heavy steel disc and had started descending the ladder down into the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress to the other side. At this point, we were totally confined into the narrow space that leads into the main area. If you're confused as to what the hell this bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was rather peculiar. I mean, I would have never known there was even an inside had we not found this manhole. So, as we squeeze and crouch, and at one point scrape along our bellies to the other side of the structure, there's a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from end to the other is surprisingly long, but by the halfway point, you can look down through the narrow gaps into the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool, which helped us keep calm in a strange way. At this point, apart from the mild discomfort and confinement, we were still just a group of guys on an adventure. This was about to change dramatically, though. No more than a few meters beyond halfway, which we could tell due to the symmetry of the passageways through the bridge, one of us claimed they could see some object in the distance at the far end. Slightly hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I reached the end first, and let me tell you, I have never felt the same sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair positioned facing a wall. On that wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or magazine, showing a fully naked lady in an erotic position. The reason I don't just refer to it as porn is because something was different about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister than sexy, if that makes any sense at all. More disturbingly, the eyes of the woman on display had been cut from the page, removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that laid before us had rendered us completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we found the condom, the horrendous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got the fuck out of there as fast as humanly possible, smashing our knees and shins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder by which we had entered. Of course, we were all praying to God that the manhole hadn't been resealed, as it was impossible to tell until you reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we promptly dashed as far away as our legs could carry us. I'm sure this ending comes as a disappointment to some of you reading this, as we, luckily, never bumped into that twisted individual who sits in the chair. But I must stress how radically out of the norm this was given where I live. The reason I mentioned the population earlier was with purpose. There is easily enough people here to escape the realms of, quote, crazy country folk, yet nowhere near enough people to have someone clearly lose grip on society without somebody taking notice. I sometimes think, though not recently as I had more or less forgotten about that night entirely, about the person who climbs down into that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit facing a wall and does God knows what, and ends up with a condom full of blood. You honestly couldn't have envisioned a more surreal situation. When I was a very young kid prior to starting school, I had several reoccurring dreams. In one, I was walking down the hallway of a farmhouse. It was decorated in a very old-fashioned style, like the era of the Little House books. The dreams had stopped by the time I was 5 or 6. When I was in college, my grandfather asked me and some of my cousins to help clean out a home about a mile away from some farmland he owned. The former owner of the house was an elderly bachelor farmer named Johnny, not an overly friendly guy, who had passed away in a nursing home. I walked inside the house and stopped in my tracks. It was the home for my reoccurring dreams. My cousins didn't believe me until I started giving them instructions. Walk down that hall. There'll be a door on the left at the far end. When you open it, there'll be a bedroom that has cream-colored wallpaper with little blue flowers on it. I was correct about every detail. We had a lot of discussions about how I could have possibly known what was in that house. No one could ever remember me being there, especially since Johnny was such a curmudgeonly guy. Not exactly toddler-friendly. Just a few years ago, my mom and I were driving in the country and went past Johnny's previous house, now inhabited by a family, if the toys in the yard were an indication. My mom said casually, "Did you know that that house was built by your great-great-great-grandfather?" I nearly drove off the dirt road. All I can think is that I had some sort of ancestral memory of that house that played out when I was a toddler. I know I had never been inside that empty house at the time I was repeatedly dreaming about it as a young child. It still gives me chills. When I was in high school, I lived in a small town in Louisiana that had nothing to offer teenagers for entertainment. During the summer months, we often occupied ourselves cruising back roads looking for adventure. We often ended up wadding creeks, stealing watermelons, or some such mischief. We had seen an old 2-story farmhouse that was almost completely hidden by massively overgrown hedges and decided to check it out one day. In the bright daylight, it was just a big, dilapidated, empty old house with some interesting poetry written in beautiful script on the peeling wallpaper of one of the upstairs bedrooms. Some weeks later, a group of us got together to go haunted house hunting. A few of us knew exactly where the hunt would be. It was not uncommon for us to go on haunt hunts, because the area is dotted with antebellum cemeteries and historic sites. Some were pretty eerie. After arriving at the house, there was a lot of mixed emotions about going in. It was a mixed crowd, male and female, bold and timid on both sides. I was eager to show one of our female companions the poetry upstairs, and had no qualms about going in there. A few others stepped up and wanted to take the trip too. There were 4 or 5 of us going in and a few more waiting outside. We walked around on the first floor, laughing and hooting out the windows, and then headed up the stairs. I was second in line with one guy in front of me, and a girl behind and 1 or 2 more behind her. Just as we were reaching the top of the stairs, I started to get goosebumps and felt a terrific chill despite the hot, humid night. The first guy hit the top landing and started to walk toward the bedroom. I was only a step behind while the others lingered on the stairs. Suddenly, I was filled with a terrible sense of dread and foreboding, a major case of the creeps. I must have not been alone, because the girl at the top of the stairs let out a blood-curdling scream and stumbled with the others scrambling down the stairs. At that same instant, the guy in front of me turned and ran flat, face-to-face into me. I struggled for a microsecond with my footing, then flew down the stairs close on the heels of the others. Those waiting outside were either laughing or showing intense concern. All of them wanted to know what happened or what we saw. There was nothing to explain though, except the horrendous feeling of some awful presence. We all tried to laugh it off, but no one hesitated about the decision to leave. I never visited that place again, and now it only exists in my memory. We went to an abandoned hospital. There was a large square staircase spiraling up to the roof on the outside of the building, locked steel door at the bottom, so the only way up was to climb on the outside up to the first landing. My buddy boosts me up and I climb over, and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife next to it on the landing. I call down, "We're definitely not alone here, dude." "No, but it's cool," says a voice behind me, scaring the shit out of me and causing me to jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy standing there, coming down the stairs from above, with hands up and palms out. "I didn't mean to scare you." He takes a seat on the stairs, so I carefully step on the handle of the steak knife, lean over the edge, and pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink beer, so we offer the homeless guy a beer too, which he gracefully accepts. We end up shooting the shit on the landing for a while. We're talking about the city, the cops, traveling, life in general. He's basically a drifter, been in town for a week or so, but he seems like a nice guy. Things are going pretty well when he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I fucking hate when I meet people that end up being aliens. You never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me for a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never stop. Sometimes I think I should just kill everyone to be safe. I realize he's definitely not joking, and there's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize this guy is fucking crazy. Yeah, man, I say. We're human. We just wanted to check out the place and drink some beer. We're gonna go ahead and move on now. We definitely don't want any trouble." He just stares in silence. So we leave him the last beer, carefully back up to the railing, jump down and walk away very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders. The entire time, he's just standing there, still and silent, and watching us leave. 5 years later, that place is still abandoned and we've never gone back. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but humans can be deceptive and dangerous in ways you can't see coming. Every once in a while, I'll go urban exploring with one of my friends. Usually, he just checks out abandoned houses and the odd factory or two. It can be a really cool experience for anyone who's into history or photography, or asbestos inhalation. Today, though, he decided we're going to a local abandoned hospital at night with just the two of us, because it'll be more, quote, intense that way, and he's evidently never seen a single horror movie in his life. Despite my mild hesitations, we end up getting to this place as it's starting to get dark. We make our way through a window that someone has torn the boarding off of, and my friend gives his usual yell throughout the building announcing his presence, so we don't startle anyone else who might be inside by saying, "We're not the cops, we're just looking around and taking some pictures." By his logic, we're doing a courtesy to anyone else exploring the building who might panic if they heard us coming otherwise. But by my logic, we're announcing our presence to every homeless person in the building who might want to steal a camera from two dumb kids. Despite my fears, nothing bad happens. We make it through the building, going through multiple floors and checking out the roof last. We get a ton of cool pictures and take a look at some creepy-ass old bathtubs and tables they left in the place. There's some really cool graffiti inside as well, mixed in with your usual shitty tags. The whole building is pitch black except for a few spots where moonlight shines through, so we literally could only see whatever we happened to be pointing our phones at the time, or by using the flash on our camera. Even though I'm still worried about being murdered, I'm glad I went, and I'm less freaked out as we're making our way back to the window we came in. We get back to the room and I hop out the window first, and have my buddy pass me the camera. As I take it from him and he starts climbing out the window, a soft voice, from what sounds like just 10 feet or so inside the building says, "Wait." I look at my friend and can just barely see a silhouette standing in the doorway from where we entered the room. Now, I'm not proud of what happened next, but at that moment, the force with which my butthole puckered propelled me away from that building with enough forward momentum to last until I was at the edge of the property back towards the road. My friend followed after me quickly, more so to laugh at me than out of fear. He didn't seem to be too worried about it, though he definitely agreed we weren't going back. I know this isn't the most exciting story, but what terrified me at the time was that I was 100% sure we were alone in that building. It was dead silent aside from us. The fact that that person waited until right as we were leaving horrified me, as it made me realize they could have been watching and following us throughout the entire building. Just listening to us talk, watching us take pictures, and following us. Needless to say, I don't do too much urban exploring anymore, at least not at night in spooky old buildings constructed before World War I. I've explored many abandoned buildings over the past 2 years, but the most scary was an abandoned mall I explored in the UK. It was late at night, and we had to do a lot to get into the shopping center as it was locked up tight. We had to somehow get on the roof through a multi-story car park. There was a 10-foot wall in our way, so we had to pile up things that we found to get over it. Once we were in, things continued as a normal routine exploration. We had explored almost all of the mall when we went downstairs to the ground floor and heard radio noise from an office. We thought it was security, so we walked back up to where we came in on the roof. As we were walking onto the roof, my mate stopped us and said that there was a guy blocking our exit. He was wearing all black and had no security badge on. So we hid a bit, waiting for him to leave, thinking he was just smoking a cigarette. But when we came back to see if he was gone, he was still there, this time holding a metal pipe. We instantly knew that there was no security guards, and that there was probably something they were hiding in the building, so they were looking for us. We went back down to the second floor and hid in a display window that was hidden from the rest of the floor. We were there for only 20 minutes tops, but it felt like years, heart pounding throughout. We heard another man walking around, dragging a piece of metal across the floor. At this point, we realized that we might have to either break out or fight our way out. My friend then remembered that there was another door on the roof that would bypass the guy guarding the other route and would take us straight out into the car park. We decided that this was the best plan to get out in one piece. We waited for the guy to leave our floor and decided to make a break for it to find the door. We couldn't rush or run as we risked the guy hearing us on our floor, so we quietly snuck around the back rooms where we finally reached what we believed was our escape route, but it was blocked by debris. At this point, I didn't care about the noise, so I started pulling off the debris and my mate kicked the door open. We ran across that roof. I have no idea if the person saw us because I was occupied on getting the fuck out of there. We got into this empty car park and made our way down to the bottom, where we saw there was another gang member sat in a blacked out Ford Transit waiting for us to come out of the car park, so our ordeal wasn't over. At this point I had enough, so I ran up one floor and found a fire exit to the outside. This fire exit was screwed shut because the car park was also abandoned, so I basically launched myself through the door, which luckily flew open, and we got out into the main road and went onto the street to blend into the nightlife. Less than a minute later, the van drove out, probably seeing that we had gotten out. We had narrowly escaped this gang. No idea what they were planning to do if they had caught us. That day completely shook me, but I'm still exploring, just being more careful with the places I choose to explore. I explored an abandoned factory near my parents' house. It was me, my partner, and my stepdad. We were picking up my partner from their house when passing by the building. Me and my partner mentioned about wanting to explore it, and my stepdad, who's like us and acts on impulse, parked near the building and we found a way in. The first weird thing we noticed is how cold the building was. It was the middle of summer, and as soon as we went through the first doorway, it felt like it was winter. Keep in mind, most of the walls were broken down, so it's not like it was just a cold, damp place. No, it was completely open. We just went through the doorway because there was debris blocking the broken walls. While my partner and stepdad were peeking through another doorway that led further into the building, I was looking through random files and cabinets there. Everything looked like it was just dropped. I found worker IDs, important files, order files, and other things in there. My stepdad pointed out that there were a lot of orders in the back that were packaged and ready to be shipped, but many of them dated back to the late 90s and early 2000s. So this place wasn't closed for too long when we went in. It was around 2018. Yet, it looked as if it had been abandoned for over 2 decades at that point. But then again, I don't know how building deterioration works. As we were talking about how strange this place was, I got this really weird feeling. That danger, fight or flight kind of feeling. I don't know how else to explain it. But anyway, I told them about it and we agreed to leave. Once back in the car and driving away, me and my partner noticed something in the doorway we just left. It looked kind of human, but not quite. Best I can explain is something out of the uncanny valley. Just human enough to pass, but something is clearly off about it. We've never gone back to it, and my partner currently lives somewhere else, but I always get a weird feeling when driving past that building. When I was in high school, my friends and I got really into exploring abandoned places. We used to research places along the East Coast and drive during the summertime to check them out and take cool pictures. This one time, a kid we knew in my buddy's class told him about this abandoned mental asylum in Maryland that was really cool because unlike most places, it was a 5-building complex with a large center building that was 3 stories tall. I forgot the name, but if anyone knows what I'm talking about, feel free to share. Naturally, this piqued our interest, so that weekend we told our parents we were going on a quote fishing trip to Maryland, and 6 of us road trip to go see this place. We started out by checking out the smaller building in the complex when we first got there, and slowly made our way around the area to look out for security. To give a sort of layout to the asylum, all of the buildings connected to each other aside from the main building and the church that was behind it. So, as we entered the first building, we decided to pull a Scooby-Doo and split up to cover more ground. I got paired with a kid in the group that really didn't want to be there to begin with, and we went down to the basement of the building. As we went down, I saw that there was a crude doorway near the staircase that was really out of place from the other large hallways upstairs. I convinced the guy that I was paired with to check it out, on the condition that I went first. The layout of this room was kind of like a ramp, so if you kept walking back it would get closer to the ceiling, and a lot darker. We had one flashlight, which I gave to my friend, and I was using my phone flashlight instead. So as I walked in, I naturally got drawn to walk straight back, while my buddy went to the left side instead. I remember saying to him as we were inside, "Damn, this place smells like shit." And when I turned around, the guy I'm with speed walks towards me and says that we need to leave, now. Thinking he was just scared, I didn't argue with him and we left, and I didn't think much of it for the rest of our time there. Later that week, my friends and I are at a party, and we're telling people about the asylum we just explored. I start telling people about the main building, and the guy I was paired up with comes by to hear what I was talking about. As I start talking about the basement and the room we were in, he pauses the story. He then tells me that the reason he made us leave so fast was because I was saying that this place smelled like shit. He saw that the left side of the room had furnaces and piles of old shoes with white medical patient clothes. We were in a morgue, and I had no idea. I still don't like to think about when it happened. I'm not sure of the exact time it happened, but I remember it was about a year ago. My friends and I always enjoyed finding abandoned places to explore, whether it was just a warehouse or a huge mansion or racetrack. There were 5 of us in this instance, all with some sort of weapon just in case, and a flashlight. We had just finished exploring some old abandoned house when my friend mentioned that he knew of a warehouse that had been abandoned for years, about 20 minutes away. So of course, we all hopped in the car and took off, listening to our favorite songs. The experience was incredibly fun, until the moment happened. We all arrive and get out. As we look for a way in, I realize that I've been here before, and so is my friend Pearson, who was right behind me. Both of us act indifferent about it. It's still fun to go look and explore, so I find a gate to jump over. This gate will be a key factor in the future. I inform my other friends that I've been here before, and it's a pretty cool area, just kinda small. We walk in and see paint tearing off the walls, smashed glass everywhere, the floor has a layer of trash, and a rancid smell reeks the entire time. You get used to it, however, so we had no complaints. But then I realized something. There's a basement. All of a sudden, my friend looks at me startled and says, "That basement door was open the last time you were here." Now for me, I don't necessarily get scared easily, so big deal, who cares? Others have probably visited recently, who knows? But this is where the scenery gets in your head. Everything is in ruins. You can see other rooms through the holes in the walls. Then, in the smallest corner in the far back of the warehouse, is a slim stairway down to a basement with a door to the left. I recall the previous time I went in, and remember one key detail. The basement door only locks from the inside. I tell all my friends this cautiously, and look down the shaded corridor into the darkness. I'm still not scared, but somewhat nervous, yet I have to prove myself to my friends. I go down. Every footstep creaks. I finally reach the door. I put my handle on the doorknob about to twist when I hear it. Someone or something was breathing right behind the door. I'm in disbelief. There's no possible way someone locked themselves back there. I twist the handle, but it's locked. I quickly shuffle up the stairs when the worst part happens. The door downstairs opened. I'd never run for my life, but in that moment I did. I didn't know what happened. We were all rushing as fast as possible through the building, and we could hear noises behind us. We didn't know if we were knocking over stuff, or if whatever was behind that door was chasing us. I run a lot, so I was the first outside. I see my hope, the gate. All I have to do is plant my foot, hop, and climb over. Foot's planted, I jump. A hand suddenly grabs my hoodie and pulls me down to the floor. My friend, I won't reveal his name, had grabbed my jacket and pulled me back down to the floor. I understood that he was panicking and was the most non-athletic one, so I let him go. Plus, he was driving and I needed that car to be started and ready. Incredibly antsy, I hop the fence last, and everybody gets in the car. Since I'm the last to enter the car, I hear the noise of what sounded like someone smashing whatever is near them inside the warehouse. I don't know what happened there, nor do I care to find out. A few years back, a friend and I were snooping around some allotments on the outskirts of our village in the UK. It was about 11 p.m., so it was pretty dark. Not a completely pitch black dark, but dark to the point where, if you were to look at a tree around 30 meters away, all you'd see was its silhouette. But up close, you could see enough to navigate without any help. The allotment was surrounded on 3 sides by deep hedgerows, with trees and then fields beyond. I'm always super vigilant in these sort of situations, so generally, I'll stop regularly, and just listen. You know, just stand as still as possible and strain my ears for people approaching, etc. My friend had crouched down around 3 meters from me to see what sort of plants were growing and was pulling at a vegetable that was growing in the soil. While I was listening, I began to hear a noise coming from the back corner of the allotment, maybe 20 to 30 meters away or so. The noise is really hard to describe. It was like a low-pitched sound that sounded vividly like someone rampantly speaking in tongues, but it was odd. It kind of seemed smaller than a human voice, but deeper. Like an animal, but speaking in tongues. All different vowel and consonant sounds rolling over. It's really hard to describe, but I can hear it vividly when I try to remember it. My friend and I had a system of hand signals, but of course he was focused on this plant. I was utterly convinced that this was going to be one of those things that you hear or see, but by the time you've got someone else's attention about it, the sound has stopped completely and no one believes you for the rest of your life. I didn't want to move, risking drawing attention to myself, so I just stood, stock still, made a short, sharp hiss type of sound with my tongue. My friend finally looked up, and I signaled in the direction of the noise. It carried on. My friend and I just stood and listened in silence for about a minute before it started to increase in volume. That was the point we decided that we had done enough investigating, and carried on as we left. As it's a few years ago now, my sane head just says it's some kind of animal, a fox or something. But I've spent a lot of time out at night, away from built-up areas, and I've never heard a noise that could even morph into that. It was just this odd babble of what sounded like made-up words, but like it was coming from a voice box that didn't sound human. At the time, we heard all sorts of theories. We knew it could have just been an animal, but there's also a lot of suspicious government installments in the area. Talk of a lot of hidden tunnel networks, and if you're out at night, you'll often see a lot of strange lights over the hill in the distance. Back in the day, my friends and I would always go to this boarded-up hospital and play in it. The only problem was all the doors were locked, and all the windows were boarded. However, there was this shed that you could climb up on and jump over a car cover thing, and there was a window that was broken where you could get in. We had been in this hospital so many times that it wasn't creepy at all anymore. Well, one day we decided we would go explore the basement that was always flooded, and we would actually try and walk down the super dark hallway that was down there. The water was probably 4 feet deep and murky, so you couldn't see the bottom. My friends and I started walking down the stairs into the basement and are shining our flashlights down into the hallway trying to see anything. All we can see is this thing that looked like a generator and shelves, but can't see too far down the hallway at all. We finally muster up the courage to begin our descent into the water, but something doesn't feel right. The water was completely motionless, and it got incredibly quiet. So quiet I swear I could hear my friend's heartbeats. My friend put one foot on a stair that was submerged, and then another. The water rippled as he continued to descend. Then, out of nowhere, we hear a huge splash in the water somewhere very nearby. The kind of splash that you would hear if someone cannonballed into it. We immediately bolted back up the stairs. I peeked down into the darkness to see nothing, but could definitely hear something coming down the hallway toward us. We ran all the way back up to the second floor and jumped off the car cover thing so fast. We waited outside for a couple hours and heard nothing and saw no one. We ended up going back inside and sitting at the top of the stairs again, listening for anything or anyone, but we heard nothing. The stairs were also pretty dry at this point. One of my friends got a bright idea and threw the flashlight down the stairs into the water to try and scare whatever might be down there. After the flashlight made a splash from the impact, we heard nothing, and the light disappeared into the darkness of the water. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, we again found the courage to charge down the stairs screaming and hollering. We went to the base of the water and jumped in, shining our flashlights down the hall making a ton of noise. Behind the generator was another hallway that was absolutely pitch black. We were standing in the water at this intersection, when all of a sudden we see this large silhouette slowly moving toward us. It looked like two barrels standing next to each other on top of the water. Then, another huge splash behind them. They split apart and started moving towards us super quickly. We again ran out and never returned to that place again. There's an abandoned East Coast insane asylum that I've often seen posted, both on Reddit as well as other various places around the internet. I've been there probably 10 or 15 times over the course of a decade, and each time I've found something new, as the complex is very spread out and very massive. What I've never seen posted, not even mentioned however, is the maze of tunnels beneath the complex. Connecting each building is a subterranean network of tunnels for steam, water, sewage, and electric. The tunnels are all roughly 10 to 15 feet underground and quite long. They lead into the basement of each structure in a portion of the complex, with an emergency escape hatch that leads out into the woods between buildings in a portion. One weird thing is that most of the entrances to the tunnel system are hidden in the walls. I exited through a door once and found myself in a room that was the complex's post office, where I'd literally been 5 times before. I had never noticed that there was a hidden passage integrated into the wood paneling. The complex has been abandoned for 20 to 30 years, so parts of the tunnels are very wet with leaking water. When you're down in them, you consistently hear the environmental noise, as well as echoes from your own movements. There is nothing reflective down there, and there is no outside sources of light either. If you don't have a bright enough flashlight, it can kind of get difficult to make out features of things in the distance, and you're relying a lot upon the slight tonal differences of what you can see to determine what something is off in the distance before you're right up on it. Go outside on a moonless night and shine an LED pinlight against a concrete wall from 15 feet away to get an idea of what I'm describing. Now, for the terror. First of all, I have a stupid habit of going into these places by myself. I've recently started correcting this, because you never know when an accident could happen, leaving you alone, underground, in the dark. The last time I was in the tunnels, I was by myself, with a single AA battery-powered lumen LED flashlight, mistake number 2. During this excursion, I decided to follow the tunnel down to what was the water treatment building for the complex. The tunnel slopes downward, so the leaking water previously mentioned runs down and collects to the tunnel's end. So, at the end of that tunnel, I enter this large room with two 15-foot tall water storage tanks. There's probably an inch of water and muck on the floor, which makes a noise when you walk. I'm standing still, looking around with my flashlight, and from the opposite side of the room, around 20 feet away, I hear There was someone else in this underground room with me. I shine my flashlight across the room and don't see anything, but keep hearing the wet footprints. All of a sudden, I shine the light on this human-shaped object that is just pitch black. There's no difference in shading or anything. It's just like a shadow against the peach-colored concrete wall. I stammer out a, hello? And all of a sudden, I can see this person's two eyes flash up, reflecting back my flashlight. But that's it. I don't know if the person was in a ghillie suit or what, but it was impossible to make out anything distinguishing. I don't know what kind of weirdo sets out in a full black getup to rummage around underground. So at this point, I flip out. I spin 180 degrees on my heels and bolt. I'm flying up the incline tunnel, slipping and sliding all over the place on the damp concrete. I fell a handful of times, sprained my wrist badly, and got some cuts on one of my knees. That run through the underground tunnels felt like an eternity. If you've ever seen the subway scene from the movie 28 Weeks Later, that's the closest description that I can offer. It was the closest thing I've ever experienced to a living nightmare. I've never been so terrified in all my life. Looking back, I'm sure whomever I met down there in the dark was probably as terrified as I was, unless they were crazy as hell. I have no reason to believe they followed me, and they probably ran back the way they came, same as I did. I noticed that they didn't have a flashlight on, so what I think probably happened is that they saw my light and pulled a hoodie up over their head, turned off their light, and tried to hide as best as they could. Sorry if this got a little long and rambly, I just wanted to share my part here. If there's a takeaway from this, it can be summed up in a single fantastic sentence. Don't enter strange underground tunnels, through hidden doors, beneath long abandoned and forgotten insane asylums, with a single tiny flashlight when you're by your lonesome.